Today I'm going to tell you the truth about Toyota oil sludge problems in their engines and oil burning problems. Now sure, Toyota makes great cars, but like any manufacturer, they've had screw-ups. And they had problems with both oil sludge that led to engine damage and plain old-fashioned oil burning because the pistons and the piston rings were poorly made and wore out too fast. Now the first thing I'm going to talk about is the oil sludge problem. Engine oil, after prolonged exposure to heat and the explosions and chemical reactions inside an engine, can break down and create sludge, gunk. Now when I was a young mechanic, this was a big problem because they started out with just plain old oil. It had no detergent in it, and so the sludge would all go on the bottom and clog everything up. But for ages they've had detergent oil, and the purpose of the detergent is to keep all the crud in suspension, so instead of making sludge, it flows through the system and stays in the oil that you change when it's dirty. Now the Toyota oil sludge problem occurred in some of the engines before 2003. They were building up too much sludge, and I personally have seen V6 Toyota engines go bad because of this. And in respect to this, in 2007, Toyota settled a class action lawsuit. They said that they would repair Toyota engines for free, which if you ask me is kind of a sleazy deal, because if you had a 97, that was 10 years before this agreement, so you wouldn't get anything out of them then. And the last one covered 2002, since that was 2007. Basically, you were only getting 3 years more warranty on the thing. Kind of a raw deal if you ask me. As you can see here, it covered a whole range of vehicles. You can read them as they go down here. You can even look it up yourself if you want. It covered quite a few Toyota and Lexus vehicles. And realize in Toyota's behalf, the vehicles that people did complain about are less than 1% failure. So it's not like they all do it. Even if you bought a used one, I've had many customers buy those used ones on the list. They had no problems with oil consumption. Personally, on this oil sludge thing, I think quite a bit of it had to do with the owners not properly maintaining their cars. In my own personal experience of customers' cars that I maintain correctly, change the engine oil and filter every 5,000 miles, none of them had sludge problems. Now, if you do have one of these engines and you're worried, go by the extreme service precaution. Like some of them will say, change it every 5. Well, me, I do mainly stop and go city driving, so mine's always extreme. And I actually change mine every 3,000 miles, or once a year, and usually it's once a year because I don't even drive that anymore. Now, the second problem I'm going to talk about here is Toyota engines and excessive oil consumptions. Now, as they age, all cars are going to burn some oil. Even my old 94 Celica, hey, it burns a little bit of oil, but it's got 240,000 miles on it. It burns about half a quart every 3,000 miles, but I never add it because I don't even drive 3,000 miles in a year anymore, so I just change the oil once a year and leave it at that. Now, since Toyota engines are used to near perfection in their vehicles, I've seen them where, yeah, they'll burn a quart of oil maybe every 1,000, 1,200 miles. They're not like the Chryslers and Mitsubishis that you see. They'll burn 2 or 3 quarts of oil a week because they're really worn. But for a Toyota, even that's too much oil consumption. Now, even I've had customers that they're driving, and when it's idling, their oil pressure light comes on. They find out the oil's too low. You burn a quart of oil, say every 1,200 miles or so, and you go to the dealer and they say, oh, that's normal. Or GM's been saying that for years. It may be normal for a particular vehicle as it wears, but it's not normal for a well-built engine to use that much oil. Sure, it's a minor pain in the butt adding oil every once in a while, but it's worse than that, because modern cars have catalytic converters, oxygen sensors. That's all in the exhaust system. And if you get a lot of oil burning, the oil is going to burn, and that residue is going to clog up the oxygen sensors. It's going to ruin the catalytic converters. And let's say you got a car that's got 3 catalytic converters. It can cost you $2 to $3 grand to have them all replaced. Not a cheap fix, so you really don't want an oil burning engine these days. It's not like the old days. In the early 70s, a friend of mine got the neighbor's car for $1. And they gave it to him for $1. And that thing went through a quart of oil every 50 miles. It was an old Ford. So he just carried 4 or 5 quarts of oil in the trunk, and when he needed it, he'd pour the oil in. No catalytic converter, a simple carburetor. Those things actually could run quite some time. The only thing you had to do was, when the spark plugs would carbon up and get all clogged and out of fire, you just take out the 8 spark plugs and put 8 new ones in. But modern cars are so much more complex. You really can't drive them when they're burning oil, especially that type of oil. Now, for this oil burning issue, in 2011, Toyota issued this bulletin. 2006 to 2011 Toyotas with the 2AZ/FE engine have excessive oil consumption and may have misfire codes because of this oil consumption. Now that's a 4-cylinder engine. You see a lot of them in the 4-cylinder Camrys. But their warranty, again, was kind of a sleazy one. It wasn't a recall, it was a TSB, a technical service bulletin. Their thing was you could bring it in and they test your engine, and if you drive your car 1,200 miles and bring it back and it's more than a quart low on oil, then they decided they were going to replace the pistons and the piston rings on it. This only lasted for 60 months or 60,000 miles. The original factory warranty, which is kind of a sleazy deal, really. They wouldn't even do it on this old thing that has 240,000 miles. It only burns half a quart every 3,000 miles. And they were saying it has to burn more than a quart every 1,200 miles. Kind of a raw deal there again. Now, I did have customers that had piston rings and the pistons replaced on ones that had less than 60,000 miles and were less than 60 months old. But I also have customers that they're still driving theirs and they burn oil, and they burn a quart every 1,000 or 800 miles. Toyota didn't fix it for them. They said, oh no, you're out of the period. I recently had a customer of mine bring one in to service, and she said, it's making this noise when I start it up and it goes away. So I checked the engine oil and there was nothing on the dipstick, and when I changed it, only half a quart of oil came out instead of 4 quarts. You only had half a quart of oil left, and she said, oh well, you know, I just had the oil changed in June, which was July, August, September, October. 4 months ago. So she thought it was good. I said, no, you got an older car now, well past any other warranty period. I said, you got to check the oil every once in a while and add it as it burns. She's lucky it didn't destroy the engine. So if you have one of these vehicles, got a lot of mileage, you want to check your oil every once in a while and put it in as it goes out. And here's a list of the engines that are covered on the top and then on the bottom. And like I said, Toyota on these piston and piston ring engines decide that they'll replace them for 5 years or 60,000 miles, the original factory warranty. But that's kind of a raw deal. They're pretty much admitting they weren't built correctly, and they're not standing behind them all. They should say, hey, you own one of these things, we'll replace them free regardless. That's something they should have done. But I guess due to the millions of cars they made with these engines, they don't want to give away billions of dollars fixing them for free. Just saying, well, it's under the factory warranty, because legally that's all they have to do. Now, in the past, I used to tell people, when they ask about car warranties, I said, don't worry about the car warranty itself. Worry about whether it's built or not. Go buy a Toyota, then since they don't break, you don't care about the warranty. Well, in this case, you do have to worry about the warranty on those engines. Now, they don't make those particular engines anymore. The new ones haven't had any problems with excessive oil consumption. They redesigned them and they built them better. But they did make mistakes then, and although they admitted a little bit, their true admission was, hey, yeah, we kind of screwed up and we'll fix it for 60,000 miles. After that, it's your buck that's going to pay for it. And really there, they did a misservice to their owners. I mean, my son, 2007 Camry, and yes, it burns oil. Toyota refused to fix it for free because it had too many miles on it. It's got less than half of what my Celica has. What would you rather have? An old one like this that burns half a quart every 3,000 miles, or one that today is burning about a quart of oil every 900 miles. So now you know the truth about Toyota oil sludge and oil consumption. And especially if you're looking at a used Toyota, check out that list I gave. Don't buy it used, or take it to a mechanic to do a wet and dry compression test to see if the engine was still in tip-top shape, or whether it's an oil burner, and you're not going to buy that one used. 2007 to 11 Toyota Camry Hybrid. 2007 to 2009 Toyota Camry. 2009 Toyota Corolla. 2009 Toyota Matrix. 2006 to 2008 Toyota RAV4. 2007 to 2008 Toyota Solera. 2007 to 2009 Scion TC. And 2008 to 2009 Scion XB. Or of course, if you're a do-it-yourself type of guy, since most of them are 4-cylinder engines, just take out all the spark plugs and look at them. And if they've got carbon buildup on the spark plug tips and it's all black, don't buy the car. It's that simple. The recall of 1.9 million Toyotas for fuel pump problems. Now, it sure came as a shock to me, because Toyota is known for quality products. To give you an example, the fuel pump in this 20 6-year-old Celica is still the original one, as is the fuel pump on this 2007 Matrix and this 2002 Lexus ES300. So I found it astounding that Toyotas that are new or 1 or 2 years old, they're going to have to recall them for fuel pump problems. I tried to read about it. They just say fuel pump problems. Toyota has no fix for it yet. I called up the dealer. They gave me the same line. Something with the fuel pumps. They don't know what. They don't know how they're going to fix them. To me, that's uncalled for. They need to give the information out to the people who are buying these cars. People buy Toyotas because they are known relatively bulletproof, not break down, not have problems. You don't want your fuel pump stopping while you're going 70 miles an hour down the road. Now, a fuel pump in a modern car is kind of like the heart inside you. Pump the fuel to the fuel injectors, just like your heart. This thing conks out, your engine's not going to run. Now, back in the old day of carburetors, fuel systems were much simpler. They had a mechanical fuel pump that bolted to the engine, and as the cam spun, it would pump the pump, and it would get anywhere from 1.5 to 2 pounds pressure into the carburetor, where it would spray it into the engine to make it run. And motorcycles, hey, they were even simpler. They didn't have a fuel pump. They had gravity feed, where the gasoline would just go into the carburetors by gravity because they were under the gas tank. The modern vehicles are much more complex. They got electric pumps that put out pressure, fuel pressure regulators. When they go to the fuel injectors, they have to have enough pressure so these tiny little holes can spray the fuel and atomize it so it runs efficiently. Older pumps like this, they put out anywhere from 20 to 60 PSI or so. Even this normal one, hey, it's got to put out just the right amount of pressure. Like I said, it can be anywhere from 20 to 65. Cars have different systems, but if it doesn't have that pressure correct all the time, car won't run right. So if you got one of these late model Toyotas and it's going to be recalled, they're not even telling us now what they're going to actually do, which I think is kind of a raw deal. But be that as it may, all cars today practically have these electric fuel pumps in the gas tank. You never think about it. They're just sitting in there quietly pumping fuel, kind of like your heart. You don't think about that. And with people, a lot of times, the cars are just like themselves. They don't think about it until it's too late and the thing breaks. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to keep your fuel pumps from crapping out. Now, as I said, most of these pumps are inside the gas tank. Now, the gas tank is a sealed system, so you want to make sure it remains sealed. Make sure you got a good gas cap. It seals out impurities. If this is ripped, or you get a code for evap leak, this could be just worn out. Make sure you got a good gas cap. If it doesn't seal, it lets air and water vapor in, and if you leave it off, rain can get in there. The water will destroy these pumps. So make sure you got a good cap, and then when you fill it up, turn it till it clicks. You hear it click. That means it's sealed. You don't want impurities getting into your gas tank. And speaking of impurities, you do need to change your fuel filter every now and then. Now, the fuel filter filters impurities from getting into your tiny little fuel injectors. So they're between the pump and the fuel injectors. And what happens is, they get too old and they're filled up with crud. They build up too much back pressure on these pumps. And guess what? Too much back pressure, the pump works harder, it's going to burn out faster. And sure, the fuel filters aren't like my old Celica where they're right under the hood where you can easily unbolt them and put them in. Like in this 07 Matrix, filters inside the gas tank. But in this case, out of sight, out of mind, you want to keep it in mind and change it every once in a while. And yes, it's kind of a pain in this case. You got to take the back seat out, get to the access panel, take that off, take the whole assembly out, and replace the filter. But just to understand, you can often get aftermarket ones for 20, 30 bucks. Sometimes the whole fuel filter assembly with the pump can cost you $700 or $800. You don't want that $700, $800 assembly to go bad early because the stupid filter's clogged up. And here, don't listen to any baloney where people say, well, you got to buy the whole pump and filter as an assembly. They all come apart, and you can replace just the filter and assembly. You don't have to buy the whole thing if it's running fine, but you want to change your filter because it's been in there for years and years. Now, another thing that you have to be leery about to keep your fuel pump from going bad, you think your car runs out of gas, you look at the gauge, it's on empty, don't keep trying to start it if it doesn't start right up. Because as naughty as it sounds, these pumps are actually lubricated by gasoline. The gasoline comes in and the bearings inside are lubricated by gasoline. Realize it's all a liquid when it's inside the gas tank. And the gasoline also helps cool them down so they don't get too hot from pumping hard all the time. But if you run out of gas, and this thing now is sucking air, the air will ruin the bearings. So let's say you run out of gas, you sit there for 10 minutes trying to start the car. If you keep cranking it, you can destroy this pump. So don't crank it if you're out of gas. So if you're one of those people who like playing games that you wait until the low fuel light is on a while before you fill it up, don't do that. Because if you do run out of gas and suck air, you can ruin this expensive little baby. And like I say, look at this one. It's 26 years old. It's still running fine. It's got the original pump. And here again, I'd love to know what the problem Toyota is having with the pumps, but I even contacted them. They wouldn't give me any information. So they're sure not going to give you any information until they feel like it. Now, a lot of times people ask me about gasoline. They'll say, Scotty, I don't like to add ethanol to the gasoline to boost the octane. I see on the pump it says may contain 10% ethanol. Well, of course it does if it says may, and they're bumping it up so they can do 15%. They say, oh, is that going to ruin my fuel pump, fuel injectors? Well, not if it's only 10 to 15%. Because they have additives in them to keep the alcohol from damaging the pump and the fuel injectors if it's fresh gas. Now, let's say you got gas that's been sitting for 2 years in a container in your garage. No, don't use it. Modern gasoline cannot be stored for long periods of time. So you don't ever want to use old gas in a modern car. Throw it away. I mean, if you got some old gas and you want to use it in your leaf blower, go right ahead. You know, probably won't bother that at all. But in a modern car, you got to make sure you have fresh gasoline. You don't want to use old stuff. Then maybe the anti-corrosive inhibitors are gone and the alcohol in that gas could cause a problem. Don't try to run a non-flex fuel car with the E85. That's 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline. Realize that the flex fuel cars are made so they can run on all kinds of levels of alcohol. They have special pumps, special fuel lines, special fuel injectors, special oxygen sensors on the exhaust to measure how much alcohol and how much gasoline is in the mix. They can run perfect on any combination, but if you stick E85 in a regular car that isn't a flex fuel one, that's made to run on plain old gasoline, that's way too much alcohol. And it will corrode cars that are not flex fuel. Because too much alcohol in a non-flex fuel car will often cause problems. Now, I'm a professional mechanic, so I got a little test kit. You can buy them on Amazon if you want. They're only like 15 bucks. And if you take a sample of the gasoline, use the kit, you'll see what percentage alcohol it's in. And I have had customers bring me cars here that didn't run right, and they were regular cars. Now, the max they could have would be 15% alcohol. Some of those had 25, 30% alcohol in them, and they were no longer running correctly. Now, I don't know if at some point in time they put E85 in it when they shouldn't have, or if the gas they bought at the pump was labeled wrong, or perhaps made wrong at the refinery, and they put too much alcohol in it, but that's not a good thing for fuel pumps in any modern car that isn't a flex fuel car. Now, as you can see with my own cars, I buy quality gasoline from regular stations. I change the fuel filters. You don't need to change that often. I think I change these things once every 6-7 years. Not something you have to do all that often. And you use quality fuel, keep a nice tight gas cap on it. If you have a well-built vehicle, that fuel pump can last indefinitely. Now, some companies like GM just use cheaply made fuel pumps. I am forever changing fuel pumps on GM products. They burn out a lot. I mean, I do have to say, before this new thing about Toyotas, and they recalled 1.9 million of them for problems with the fuel pump, even though they don't say exactly what it is, I have only ever changed 2 fuel pumps on in-tank Toyotas in my entire 52-year career of fixing them. And one of those was in an old Supra, the real Supras that were made in Japan, not the German BMW one, and the pump had rusted out because the guy had let the tank go dry and something leaked on the cap, and there was a lot of water in the gas tank, and the gas tank and the pump inside were corroded solid. I mean, it was just solid orange rust. The gas tank, the fuel filter, the fuel pump, it all had to be replaced. That had nothing to do with the car. That was just because it was 30-something years old and it wasn't taken care of and water got in the gas tank. So now you know a little bit more about electric fuel pumps in your car that are inside the gas tank and what you can do to ensure that they last as long as possible, especially if you've got one of those American designs where you got to drop the whole gas tank because they were too cheap to put an access panel on it, and that can cost a fortune, and invariably it'll happen when the tank's almost full. So then you got to empty the tank out because it weighs too much, and then you got to do something with the old gasoline. It creates a gigantic mess that you want to avoid if at all possible. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.